5 financial habits keeping you poor. Let me give you a reality check right out of the gate. Most people don't have a money problem. They have a discipline problem. You keep telling yourself you need a higher salary, a better opportunity, a lucky break. That's a comforting story. It's also wrong. I've seen people making six figures stay broke, and people making modest incomes quietly build real wealth. The difference isn't income, it's behavior. Money is brutally honest. It doesn't care about your intentions, your plans, or how hard you feel like you're trying. It responds to structure, consistency, and decisions, nothing else. If your financial habits are weak, your bank account will expose you every single time. And here's the part most people don't want to hear. The habits keeping you poor, you practice them daily, automatically, without even noticing. So if you're not where you want to be financially, don't look outward. Look at what you're doing with money every single day, because that's exactly why you're stuck. That's backwards. When I spend first and invest whatever happens to remain, I'm not building wealth. I'm funding my own stagnation. The math doesn't lie. If I prioritize consumption, I eliminate the very capital I need to generate future returns. No capital means no ownership. No ownership means no cash flow beyond my own effort. And that locks me into a cycle where I have to keep working just to maintain my lifestyle. Every dollar I spend thoughtlessly is a dollar that could have been deployed into an asset. And assets are the only things that actually create wealth. They produce cash flow, they appreciate over time, and they compound. When I ignore that and choose immediate gratification, I'm making a decision, whether I admit it or not, to delay or even destroy my financial future. This is where discipline comes in. I don't wait to see what's left at the end of the month. I allocate capital first. I treat investing like a non-negotiable expense. That means I'm consistently buying assets before I buy comforts. It forces me to think like an owner, not a consumer. Owners deploy capital with intention. Consumers spend based on emotion. And let's be clear about cause and effect. If I build the habit of investing first, I create a system where capital accumulates. That capital gets put to work. It generates returns. Those returns get reinvested. Over time, that compounding effect becomes powerful. But if I reverse the order, if I spend first, I interrupt that entire process. There's nothing left to compound. I stay stuck. Most people underestimate how small decisions scale over time. It's not about one bad purchase. It's about the pattern. If I repeatedly choose short-term satisfaction over long-term gain, I train myself to think small. I build a lifestyle that consumes everything I earn, and then I wonder why I'm not getting ahead. Serious wealth building requires a different mindset. Before I spend a dollar, I ask, does this create value or does it remove capital? Does it move me closer to ownership or deeper into consumption? That's how I protect capital. That's how I stay focused on outcomes that actually matter. I also evaluate risk before reward. Investing first doesn't mean throwing money at random opportunities. It means being deliberate. I look for assets that generate cash flow or have strong potential to appreciate. I assess downside risk. I protect my principal. Because if I lose capital, I lose the ability to play the game. And here's the shift that changes everything. I stop thinking about money as something I spend and start thinking about it as something I deploy. My goal is to make money work for me. That means every dollar has a job. It either builds an asset, generates income, or supports the system that allows me to keep doing both. When I do this consistently, I reduce my dependence on earned income. I build streams of cash flow that operate without my direct involvement. That's when I start gaining leverage. That's when time becomes an asset instead of a constraint. At the end of the day, the outcome is predictable. If I spend first, I stay broke. If I invest first, I build wealth. The habit decides the result. When I avoid risk completely, I'm not protecting my future. I'm guaranteeing that my money loses value over time. Capital sitting idle does not stay neutral. It gets eroded by inflation, missed opportunities, and lack of growth. So the cause and effect is clear. If I refuse to take any risk, I accept a slow financial decline. On the other side, if I take reckless, uninformed risks, I expose my capital to unnecessary loss. Either extreme leads to the same outcome. I don't build wealth. The real discipline is learning how to price risk. That means I don't ask, is this risky? Everything is risky. I ask, is the potential return worth the risk I'm taking? That's how owners think. I evaluate downside first. How much can I lose? Can I absorb that loss without damaging my overall position? If the answer is no, I walk away. Protecting capital is always the first priority, because without capital, I'm out of the game. Once I understand the downside, then I look at the upside. Is there a clear path to cash flow? Is there value being created? Is this asset going to produce income, appreciate, or both? If the numbers don't make sense, I don't move. Emotion has no place here. Excitement does not justify risk. Fear does not eliminate it. Only analysis gives me control. Most people stay broke because they misunderstand risk. They either hide from it or chase it blindly. They keep money in low return environments out of fear, or they jump into speculative opportunities hoping for fast gains. Both behaviors come from emotion, not strategy. And the result is predictable, either stagnation or loss. When I start pricing risk properly, everything changes. I begin to see opportunities where others see uncertainty. I focus on assets that generate cash flow because cash flow reduces risk over time. It gives me a return while I hold the asset. It creates stability. That's how I make money work for me instead of relying only on appreciation or luck. Also diversify with intention, not by spreading myself thin, but by allocating capital into different assets that serve specific purposes. Some produce steady income, others offer growth potential. Each decision is calculated. I'm not guessing, I'm building a system. And here's where repetition shapes outcomes. If I consistently evaluate risk before making decisions, I avoid major losses. I preserve capital. That allows me to stay in the game long enough for compounding to take effect. But if I ignore risk, even once in a significant way, I can wipe out years of progress. That's the cost of undisciplined thinking. Thinking like an owner means I accept that risk is part of the process, but I control how I engage with it. I don't gamble with my future. I make calculated moves based on data, logic, and expected outcomes. I understand that every dollar I deploy carries responsibility. At the end of the day, avoiding risk keeps me stuck, and chasing it blindly sets me back. Pricing it correctly moves me forward. That's the difference. Income feels productive. It gives me the illusion of progress because money is coming in. But if all I focus on is earning, I trap myself in a cycle where my financial growth is directly tied to my time and effort. That's a linear model, and linear models don't build wealth. The cause and effect is simple. If I depend only on income, I stay dependent on work. The moment I stop, the money stops. That's not security, that's exposure. The real shift happens when I stop asking, how much can I earn? And start asking, what can I own? Ownership is what creates leverage. Assets generate income without requiring my constant involvement. That's how I break the link between time and money. If I ignore that and keep chasing higher paychecks, I might increase my lifestyle, but I won't increase my freedom. Most people make the same mistake. They upgrade their spending as their income grows. More money comes in, more money goes out. The pattern stays the same. There's no accumulation of assets, no increase in cash flow beyond earned income, and no long-term strategy. That's how high earners stay broke. It's not about how much I make, it's about what I keep and what I build with it. When I think like an owner, income becomes a tool, not a goal. I use it to acquire assets that produce returns. That could be equity in a business, income-generating investments, or anything that creates consistent cash flow. The key is that the asset works, not me. That's how I make money work for me instead of working endlessly for money. But I don't just chase any asset. I evaluate risk before reward. I look at the numbers. Is there real cash flow? Is the business model sustainable? What's the downside if things go wrong? Protecting capital is critical because one bad decision can wipe out progress. So I stay disciplined. I focus on value creation. If an asset doesn't produce or has no clear path to growth, it's not an investment. It's speculation. There's also a difference between assets and liabilities, and confusing the two is expensive. If I buy something that takes money out of my pocket every month without generating returns, that's not building wealth. It's draining it. I don't care how it looks or how it feels. If it doesn't produce, it doesn't belong in a serious financial strategy. The repetition of this behavior defines my future. If I consistently convert income into assets, I build a portfolio that generates its own income. That income gets reinvested, creating more assets, more cash flow, and more stability. Over time, I reduce my reliance on earned income. That's how wealth compounds. That's how financial independence becomes real. But if I ignore this and keep focusing only on earning, I stay stuck. I might work harder, earn more, and still feel like I'm not getting ahead. Because I'm not building anything that lasts. I'm just maintaining a system that depends entirely on me. Personal accountability matters here. No one is responsible for how I use my income except me. Every dollar I earn is a decision point. I either deploy it into something that builds my future, or I spend it on something that disappears. That's the difference between thinking like an owner and behaving like a consumer. At the end of the day, income alone won't make me wealthy. assets will. If I want long-term financial success, I have to build what pays me, not just work for what pays me. Emotion is the fastest way to destroy capital, and I see it happen every day. When I let how I feel dictate what I do with money, I stop operating like an owner and start reacting like a consumer. That shift alone is expensive, because the moment emotion enters the decision, discipline leaves, and without discipline, there is no consistent path to wealth. The cause and effect is immediate. If I buy based on impulse, I accumulate liabilities instead of assets. If I panic when markets drop, I sell at a loss and lock in failure. If I chase trends because everyone else is making money, I enter late and take on maximum risk for minimum reward. Every emotional move has a predictable financial consequence, and it's almost always negative. Wealth building requires control, not occasional control, consistent, repeatable discipline. That means I don't make decisions in the moment. I make them in advance. I define where my money goes, what kind of assets I invest in, what level of risk I'm willing to accept, and what outcomes I expect. Then I execute that plan without hesitation, regardless of noise or pressure. When I think like an owner, I detach from emotion and focus on numbers. Does this decision protect my capital? Does it generate cash flow? Does it move me closer to owning income-producing assets? If the answer is no, I don't do it. It doesn't matter how exciting it feels or how popular it is. Excitement does not create returns. Strategy does. Protecting capital is the first priority. Emotional decisions ignore that. They expose me to unnecessary risk because they're driven by urgency or fear. I might overpay for an asset because I don't want to miss out, or I might exit too early because I'm uncomfortable with short-term volatility. In both cases, I lose, not because the opportunity was bad, but because my behavior was undisciplined. I also have to understand that repetition shapes results. One emotional decision might seem small, but patterns are what define outcomes. If I repeatedly act on impulse, I build a habit of poor allocation. My money flows toward consumption, speculation, or reactive moves instead of structured investments. Over time, that destroys any chance of compounding. On the other hand, when I consistently follow a disciplined process, I create stability. I evaluate risk before reward. I invest in assets that produce or have a clear path to value creation. I stay focused on cash flow because cash flow gives me control. It reduces pressure. It allows me to make decisions from a position of strength instead of desperation. Making money work for me requires patience. Emotional thinking doesn't allow for that. It wants immediate results. It wants validation. But real wealth is built by consistent action over time, not by chasing quick wins. If I can't control my reactions, I can't control my financial future. Personal accountability is critical here. I can't blame the market, the economy, or anyone else for bad decisions. If I lose money because I acted emotionally, that's on me. And that's actually an advantage because it means I can fix it. I can build systems, rules, and habits that remove emotion from the equation. At the end of the day, emotion leads to inconsistent decisions, and inconsistent decisions lead to poor outcomes. Discipline does the opposite. That's the difference. If I'm not tracking my money, I'm not in control of it. It's that simple. Money doesn't disappear randomly. It moves based on decisions. And if I'm not measuring those decisions, I'm operating blind. The cause and effect is direct. Lack of tracking creates blind spots. Blind spots create waste, and waste destroys my ability to build capital. When I don't know exactly where my money is going, I can't identify leaks. Small, repeated expenses add up. Poor investments go unnoticed. Missed opportunities stay invisible. Over time, that lack of awareness compounds into stagnation. I might feel like I'm working hard, earning more, trying to improve, but the results don't show up because the system underneath is broken. Serious wealth building starts with visibility. I track cash flow. I know what's coming in, what's going out, and where it's going. Not approximately exactly. Because once I have that data, I can make decisions with precision. I can cut what doesn't serve me, and I can redirect capital into assets that produce returns. Thinking like an owner means I treat my personal finances the same way a business tracks its performance. A business that doesn't measure revenue, costs, and profit fails. The same applies to me. If I don't measure my financial activity, I have no strategy. I just have movement. Tracking also forces accountability. I can't hide from the numbers. If I'm overspending, I see it. If I'm not investing enough, it's clear. If my money is tied up in liabilities instead of assets, the evidence is right there. That clarity removes excuses. It puts responsibility back where it belongs, with me. And once I take responsibility, I can take control. I can start allocating capital intentionally. I can prioritize building assets over funding consumption. I can focus on opportunities that generate cash flow instead of draining it. That's how I begin shifting from working for money to making money work for me. There's also a direct link between measurement and risk management. If I'm not tracking my investments, I don't know my exposure. I don't know how much capital is at risk, what returns I'm actually getting, or whether my strategy is working. That's dangerous because unmanaged risk leads to unexpected losses, and unexpected losses destroy momentum. When I track consistently, I can evaluate performance. I can compare expected outcomes with actual results. If something isn't working, I adjust. If something is performing well, I scale it. That's disciplined execution. That's how real growth happens, not by guessing, but by measuring and improving. Repeated behavior defines the outcome. If I ignore my numbers, I reinforce a habit of avoidance. That habit leads to poor decisions because I'm acting without information. But if I build the habit of tracking and reviewing regularly, I create a feedback loop. I learn faster, I correct mistakes earlier, I protect my capital and deploy it more effectively. This isn't complicated, but it requires consistency. I don't track once and forget it. I do it regularly. I review my position, my cash flow, my asset base. I stay engaged. Because wealth isn't built by accident. It's built by attention and discipline over time. At the end of the day, if I don't measure it, I can't improve it. And if I don't take responsibility, I can't change it. That's the line between staying stuck and moving forward. If you're serious about changing your financial position, then stop consuming this and start executing. Pick one habit, just one, and fix it today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. If you've been spending first, reverse it and allocate capital before anything else leaves your account. If you've been avoiding risk, sit down and actually evaluate one real opportunity with numbers. If you're only chasing income, identify one asset you can start building or acquiring. If emotion has been running your decisions, put rules in place and follow them. If you're not tracking your money, start measuring every dollar immediately. This is not about knowing more. It's about doing more with precision. Wealth is built by consistent, disciplined action. Small decisions, repeated daily, create massive outcomes over time. You don't need a breakthrough idea. You need a structured approach and the discipline to stick to it. So make a decision. Are you going to keep reacting, or are you going to start operating like an owner? Because the moment you take control of your habits, you take control of your financial future.